It's official. Greg Kerkvliet is returning for his final season with Penn State Wrestling. And as much as I want to sit here and say that he is the favorite to win another heavyweight championship, I can't do that. At least not yet.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's not Younger Bastida. It's not Nick Feldman. It's certainly not Colton Schultz. It's actually someone that college wrestling spectators and fans should be very familiar with. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I am your host, Zach Seyko. And thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section with this one. Greg Kerkvliet, not the number one wrestler yet at heavyweight. I'm waiting for some news. Then Beau Bartlett possibly alluding to a move to 157. We'll give some clarity on that. And then Zain Retherford. The Zain train is an Olympian. Could he be the next Penn State assistant coach? We're discussing all of that on today's episode. We begin with Greg Kerkvliet. Now, why he wouldn't be the number one wrestler? Well, Zach, he just won the heavyweight title. What could possibly happen to where he wouldn't return as the number one ranked guy? Well, that's if Gable Steveson decides to return to collegiate wrestling. And I know it comes as a little bit of a surprise here. He was just released from his WWE contract, and there's a lot to this. So if Gable Steveson comes back, I can't guarantee that Greg Kerkvliet wins a heavyweight title until we know what Gable Steveson decides, because there is a strong possibility that he does return to college wrestling. Probably not at Minnesota. I would say maybe Iowa, maybe Oklahoma State. NIL, there's a lot of things that can happen. So how can this be? Well, it appears to be that he still has 1 year of eligibility left to wrestle in college from what would be deemed an Olympic red shirt, since he did compete back in 2020 and won Olympic gold. And Steveson, as I mentioned, just released from his WWE contract. In my opinion, this route to this career change was interesting, to say the least. Now, I'm never going to say, don't pursue your dreams, if this is what you wanted to do. And that's what he said, wrestle in WWE, become a professional wrestler. But it kind of just took a turn for not the best, right? Obviously didn't pan out here. So it's weird to see him dominate at the collegiate level, win Olympic freaking gold, and then come up short in WWE. I will never discredit anyone for following their dream, but Steveson returning to this setting feels a little more natural, like things are coming back to order here, because this is where he was best, right? So the WWE path doesn't work out. Now, the first headlines that emerged weren't necessarily about him returning to college wrestling. They were actually talking about the NFL. Yeah, professional football teams asking if he has any interest, seeing if there was any, if he would like an invite. Who knows what that would look like there? But the NFL franchises in contact with Gable Steveson, which makes sense. It's just how incredible of an athlete he is. He has the appropriate build. It would just be a matter of technique, but he's already, working on combat, right? What's transitioning from college to WWE to NFL? I think he'd be able to make the jump. Honestly, I would compare him and say that he is the Aaron Donald of amateur wrestling. I think that is an accurate description for what Steveson is. So while the NFL is an option, the MMA is something that he's expressed interest in as well. So Steveson has some options to weigh here, and I don't know that they're all equal. And there's some evidence to this. He's only 23. He's got a lot of choices here. He's got a lot of options to weigh, but one of them is returning to collegiate wrestling. Oh, yeah. That would mean that Greg Kerkvliet is no longer the number one wrestler. I'll get to, how this would be, because there is a debate for it. But what is the likelihood that Steveson actually returns to NCAA wrestling here? Well, Booker T wrestling legend, of course, currently a commentator for the WWE, and said on his podcast that Steveson didn't work out in the WWE because he still had an urge to compete in amateur wrestling. Here is the direct quote. I really think that the amateur wrestling bug was still in his system, and it was hard for him to really get it out. He still had something to prove, and there again, just having one foot in, one foot out, and I think that's what his problem was. So there you have it. Steveson having that urge to get back to folk style, freestyle wrestling. Again, he could go the MMA route. He could try his hand at the NFL. Who knows? Again, he's capable of doing any of them. But right there, from somebody that knows wrestling above all else, says that amateur wrestling is calling Steveson to return. I can't sugarcoat it if this is the case. If he comes back, Steveson is the number one ranked wrestler wherever he is. Minnesota, Oklahoma State, Iowa. We can have that discussion if and when it does actually happen. But that's why I'm waiting for the news, because Gable Steveson, as a folk style wrestler, freestyle wrestler, is better than Greg Kerkvliet. Oh, but Greg Kerkvliet's probably closed the gap. Look how he dominated the heavyweight class. He did well in freestyle at the Olympic trials, even though he didn't necessarily become an Olympian. Kerkvliet may have closed the gap because he's been actively training in folk style and freestyle wrestling. However, it's not like Gable Steveson hasn't been training all along to stay in peak performance. And who knows what he's doing behind the scenes, right? With the peak training. So he could, again, that 1 foot in, 1 foot out. What does that 1 foot out look like behind the scenes? Is he training for freestyle? Or is he training for MMA? Or was he thinking about football, right? We don't exactly know what Stevenson's plans are ultimately. But I can't sit here with confidence and say if Steveson comes back, wrestles a full NCAA season, and these two would meet in the championship bout at heavyweight, and who knows, Big Tens or anything like that, depending on where Steveson would hypothetically end up. But Kerkvliet may have closed some of the gap, but it was Stevenson's. Let's not pretend that this wasn't Stevenson's weight class when he was there. He dominated for 3+ years and then was able to keep Mason Paris at an arm's length, and then Greg Kerkvliet as well. And those scores, they wrestled twice in folk style, and then Steveson did tech ball Kerkvliet about 4 years ago when they were at the last Olympic trials in 2020. But this was Stevenson's class 2 years prior. So if the king returns, okay, Kerkvliet's sitting in his throne, but I can't just say that Kerkvliet has done enough to prove to me that Steveson isn't the number one wrestler. He didn't exactly dominate Kirk, but there was a clear distance between the two of them. Again, that was 2 years ago. That was 2022, 2021, and 2020, where Steveson won every step of the way, and Kerkvliet slowly closed the gap, but you could tell that there was just a disadvantage when Kerkvliet was going up against Steveson, and it's not, I feel like this is like riding a bike. If Steveson isn't actively training in folk style wrestling, he's going to be able to pick it back up if he ultimately decides to come back to the NCAA. He's training in combat anyway, and I imagine that his transition back to collegiate wrestling is going to be very seamless. So that's the fact of the matter here. Until Steveson says, I'm going the MMA route, I'm going into pro football, I'm signing with an NFL franchise, Greg Kerkvliet is not guaranteed to win an NCAA championship here if Gable Steveson does, in fact, decide to come back to college. Still to come on the show here. More lineup conundrums here. Beau Bartlett alluding to 157 pounds. I'm here to tell you why that might be smoke and mirrors here, because I just can't see it happening. I really can't. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you find professionals you cannot find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows and understands that so many businesses are wearing a lot of hats and might not have the time to necessarily to devote to hiring. And LinkedIn's always constantly finding ways to make the process more intuitive. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So become one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? Do you ever have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? How about you make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, and it's all streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Beau Bartlett moving up from 141 pounds to 157 pounds. Not a chance. Absolutely no chance. I'm not buying it. So where does this stem from, actually? So Beau Bartlett simply commented 157 with the handshake emoji on what looked to be Instagram in the comment section here. I'll preface it with this. I already think Carter Starachi making that hypothetical jump, because obviously nothing's confirmed yet, but everything's alluding to that 197 seems to be the likely destination for Starachi here. I think that's a big jump as it is. So does PSU, does Penn State do it again with Beau here? And I can't see it happening. So what exactly does this mean? Let's translate this. Bartlett has joked about this before, actually, in 2021. And I know this might be scraping the barrel here. We are in the off-season mode, right? We're kind of looking for, hey, what can we figure out with the starting lineup? What pieces can we put together to try to predict and project the starting lineup? So I find this interesting, and I hope all of you do as well. Bartlett's joked about bulking to 157 before. Raising Cane's, a popular fast food chain, announced it was building its location at the time in State College, and Bartlett said 157, here we come. So that was 2021, 2022, and that was a joke, saying, like, hey, I'm going to bulk up from eating all the Raising Cane's chicken here. I just can't see Bartlett at 157 in any lineup. Maybe if that's a select match or two, but when it comes to Big Tens, NCAAs competing in the most important dual meets of the season, Iowa, Ohio State, who knows if Penn State's going to wrestle Oklahoma State this upcoming season. 157. That's a massive jump, as I've already mentioned. Let's look at Beau Bartlett's start to his career at Penn State. He was at 149 pounds and was in the starting lineup and effective, right? All-American, competed very well, but he had to wrestle there because of Nick Lee. Nick Lee was still winning championships. He was on the team. And Bartlett, contributed a lot, contributed a significant amount, but it was not a natural weight class for him. I just compare the results. I'm not saying he can't wrestle at 149. I don't even know. And I would think that he could wrestle at 157, but where is he most effective? This isn't a matter of can he do it or can he not do it? Where is he going to give you the best results in the lineup? And come on, the obvious weight is 141 because, again, it's all there. The evidence is there. I don't need to argue this. Could he actually bulk to 157 and wrestle? Sure. Why not? But he's an All-American contender at 149, 157, even if it's just one weight class. At 141, he's a championship contender. And him and Jesse Mendez are that close to one another. We witnessed all of their bouts through the regular season to Big Tens. And I know that Jesse Mendez got the advantage in Big Tens and NCAAs when it mattered most. But a scramble or a millisecond in a different, in the difference of the scramble, right, in the sequence, and Bartlett might come out on top on all three of them. Okay, so they're that close at 141. I don't think that he would be as strong at 149. And I'm not talking in terms of strength and how much he can lift and handling. I'm talking about a wrestler in the starting lineup. He would be, of course, more effective at 141. And I think I know. Okay. I'm very confident. I can say with reassurance that he will be back at 141. But let's translate this further. I think he's referring to a teammate. 157. We've already talked about it on the show that Levi Haines could vacate that starting spot to compete in the freestyle and train and possibly put on weight that way. So what does that mean? What about the idea of Shane Van Ness at 157? I think that could make some sense. Tyler Casack at 157. Now, again, that's another jump. He was supposed to be the wrestler at 141 and redshirt behind Beau Bartlett, and then ultimately make his way up to 149. But the injury to Shane Van Ness happened, and then look what it led to Casack doing at 149, going on a tear and finishing at third place. But Casack at 157 possibly could make some sense here, okay? We know this for a fact. It is getting difficult for Levi Haines to make the cut to 157. Could he do it? Yes, it's not impossible, but is it getting more difficult year after year after year as he just becomes a stronger young man? Yes, that is also true. Bartlett's had high praise for Casack. Anytime we've had the chance to talk to Beau Bartlett during the regular season, especially when Tyler Casack was brought up because he had to spar against him since they were both the wrestlers at 141, and Bartlett had nothing but high praise for Casack. So maybe this is alluding to somebody else moving to that 157 spot. Because again, Casack was supposed to be the 141 pounder in waiting behind Bartlett and take that red shirt, but that obviously all changed with the Shane Van Ness injury. It's a possibility. It is all a possibility, and this is what we have to do at this point to kind of figure out this lineup, because Penn State has so many options here. Logistically, Penn State has a lot to figure out here between 125. And then if you have a conundrum at 125, what does that mean for 133? Okay. And then you have 149. You have 157 to think about. You have 164, 174, 184, 197, right? All of those have to be figured out. The only ones that are a certainty here are 141 and heavyweight with Beau Bartlett and Greg Kerkvliet. So it's a nice problem to have, if you will, for Cael Sanderson and company. Cael can do whatever he wants here because of all the options that he has to fill out any lineup that he chooses at the end of the day. So they can work, and Jeff Byers has said this. The voice of Penn State Wrestling has backed this up and said that they're going to have conversations and they're going to figure out what makes sense for each individual wrestler, if that's a red shirt, competing internationally, and what ultimately lies ahead for this 2024-25 season. Now, Zain Retherford, what a run to turn it around and become an Olympian. He is officially qualified for the 2024 Paris Olympics. Could he be Penn State's next assistant coach? We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Gear up for the ultimate NBA and NHL showdowns as FanDuel is welcoming new customers with a golden opportunity. $150 in bonus bets with just any $5 winning bet. That's a whopping $150 to play on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. So don't miss out on this exclusive offer. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and seize your chance to turn every playoff moment into a victory. And with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the thrill never stops. So join the winning team today and experience the excitement like never before. Elevate your game, make every shot count, and dominate the playoffs with FanDuel. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Jimmy Kennedy's off to Oklahoma State with David Taylor, meaning that there's an assistant wrestling coach opening at Penn State. And could that guy be Zain Retherford? Well, at this very moment, I don't think Zain is actually thinking about that. He's probably thinking about the 4-match win streak that he went on to become an Olympian. He had to go out to Istanbul, Turkey, and just that's historic, right? Zain Retherford has one of the most decorated careers in Penn State wrestling history. And to do this, to lose and have to go through the repechage and win to get back into this position, And this isn't against just any old competition. These are the best wrestlers in the world that he had to do this against. And it came down to, criteria and some very close bouts. He won some of them convincingly. He won them just by a little bit, but it doesn't matter. He is all 6 of the Olympic wrestlers from the United States are now going out. Spencer Lee qualified for the Paris Olympics as well at 57 kilos. And now Zain Retherford is officially the United States representative since he has now qualified because of what he did. Again, the four matches in a row. It's not like he had to go back the next day. So not only did you have to rebound from a loss and go up against this stiff kind of competition, and it wasn't winning 1 or 2, right, to secure this victory. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, right? All those matches in a row on the same day in a time zone that honestly you're probably not he's probably not all too familiar with, right? Being over in the United States. So these matches, starting at 3 a.m. Eastern time, I mean, really, the cards were stacked against Retherford above all other, and he was able to defy the odds and make it so that the U.S. had a complete team going out to the Paris Olympics. I would have hated to see either of Spencer Lee or Zain Retherford again, because we're all on the same team at this point. I know where Spencer Lee wrestled. I know who he's wrestling for as far as his wrestling club goes. But now we are all on the same team here when it comes to the United States of America. And Retherford did not let anybody down and certainly rose to the occasion here to become that last qualifier. Then there's coaching now. Okay. Where does this come from? Well, Zain Retherford was named by Aaron Brooks as one of the possible replacements for Jimmy Kennedy. Thomas Gilman would have made sense, but Gilman is also following David Taylor to Oklahoma State as well. So they are looking for that next assistant coach, and it would make sense because Jimmy Kennedy worked with Braden Davis, worked with Beau Bartlett extensively, right? The lower weight classes. And now there's a vacancy here. And Aaron Brooks went on the Bashamania podcast, and at the end of it, you can listen to him say, hey, who would be the ideal candidate to replace Jimmy Kennedy? And he just simply said, he didn't go through a long list or anything and gave his preferences. He said, honestly, either of Zain Retherford or Nick Lee, because they are honorable men. Why is it Zain Retherford when he's getting ready to compete at the 2024 Paris Olympics? And well, I mean, either of them could happen, right? Either of them could be an option here. I will take Aaron Brooks's approval. If Aaron Brooks says those would be his top 2 candidates to be the next assistant coach on staff, then I'm going to take his word for it. Okay. He didn't name anybody else or circle around the subject. He said Retherford or Nick Lee. Now, Nick Lee it was confirmed in the news that he's going to be grappling. He's going to have his first grappling match. So it does get a little complicated if Zain and Nick are going to be actively competing. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done. Vincenzo Joseph, former Penn State wrestler, obviously has done this. He was competing with the Sun Kiss Kids Wrestling Club while at the same time being a coach at Stanford and a recruiting coordinator, but he did just announce his retirement at the end of the Olympic trials here, so he's going to focus on coaching and other extracurriculars here, right? And then for David Taylor and Thomas Gilman, they just accepted their respective positions with Oklahoma State, and subsequently they retired and said that we are finished competing in wrestling. So if Zain and Nick are at the top of their games, whatever that is, if that's freestyle, if that's grappling, right? If they still want to compete, it's going to be difficult to coach simultaneously in Penn State, as the number 1 wrestling program in the country is going to need everybody at the top of their game. Now, Aaron Brooks doesn't say this without reason. He believes that Zain Retherford and Nick Lee are qualified to be that assistant coach. Again, they're very decorated wrestlers. Of course, Retherford a little more so than Lee, and he is the Olympic representative here at 65 kilos. So Retherford makes a little more sense here. But if Retherford says no, the next option here is not too much of a drop-off if you go from Zain to Nick in this conversation here. It's kind of, I think it goes either way, 50-50. We saw what happened with David Taylor, right? Doesn't ultimately win, doesn't become the Olympic representative at 86 kilos and becomes the head coach at Oklahoma State. Because what if he beat Aaron Brooks and was the Olympic representative. That decision to become the head coach at Oklahoma State probably doesn't become as easy. And I don't know that Oklahoma State even who knows, right? If they even contact him at that point, because he's still going to be training and still has a future ahead of him. And that changed with Aaron Brooks defeating him at the U.S. Olympic trials. So if Zain Retherford goes out and has the Olympics of a lifetime, does very well, he medals, right? Is he going to really want to stop, or is he going to strike while the iron's hot and continue to be in the prime of his career? That's a conversation that's going to need to be had. Assistant coaching positions obviously don't open up very often, with Casey Cunningham, being one of the ones contacted by Oklahoma State and saying, you know what, I'd rather be an assistant coach at Penn State as opposed to the head coach at Oklahoma State. So with that idea in mind, coaching positions at with the Penn State wrestling program do not open up very often here. And if Zain Retherford and Nick Lee were to take that spot, if they were to be offered, right? We don't know what Cael Sanderson has in mind. I'm sure that Retherford and Lee are options. But that's a conversation that they need to have about how are they going to balance what they're doing with competition and what they're going to do with their coaching careers and when that would start. And if they're open to a retirement, this seems like the age range here where, if you're kind of in your late 20s, early 30s, Jordan Burroughs is an exception. David Taylor's an exception as well. 33 is older, right? 35, 36 years old is obviously that exception. But we've seen Thomas Gilman in his late 20s saying, I'm done. I'm finished. I'm not going to compete anymore. I'm going to focus on coaching. So what would that mean for Retherford? It is truly a toss-up here. It is truly a toss-up. It depends how the Olympics would go. It depends, how quickly Penn State would fill the vacancy, if Cael already has somebody in mind, or if he is waiting to see and give Zain his piece to go out and compete and not put that pressure on him right away, and then have that conversation after the Paris Olympics are over and say, hey, I left this open for you to, don't know where he is on the candidate list, but I think he is a legitimate candidate. Again, Aaron Brooks doesn't say that without reason. Zain Retherford is a legitimate candidate for that assistant coaching spot. I think Nick Lee would be as well. Retherford is a little more qualified in this sense just because of what he's accomplished. But like I said, the gap isn't that far apart. I think either one of them would be incredible assistants. Again, they wrestled 141, 149 in college. They'd easily be able to work with anybody from Luke Lillidahl to Aaron Nagel, Braden Davis, Beau Bartlett, right? Any of them for this upcoming season and beyond. And it keeps it within the wrestling room. You're not going outside of the program to try to fill the position. You can hire somebody within in-house that already knows how things are, and there isn't that delay to catch up and get adjusted, get acclimated to anything. I'm all on board if Zain Retherford does become the assistant coach, that next assistant coach for this Penn State wrestling staff. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate everyone checking out this episode. We're going to have more conversations about wrestling as things continue to develop with the lineup, with the coaching changes, and of course, more football and recruiting talk. So for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And once again, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoyed this conversation around Penn State wrestling, leave a like on this show, share it with friends and family, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the extended conversation. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around all of your favorite Penn State sports teams. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.